We are live if you're watching on Tuesday, May 12th, and there will be an opportunity to call in with your questions later on in this program. Tonight, we're looking at how the pandemic is affecting the Latin community, millennials, and baby boomers. Joining me this evening are author, public speaker, and teacher, Miss Angela Aguirre. She's also the host of a podcast entitled Millennial Mija, and author and historian, Miss Roberta Martinez. Roberta, you have written a book, I believe, called Latinos in Pasadena. Thank you both for being here tonight. If each of you would take a moment or two to tell our viewers about yourselves. I think we decided that, Angela, you were going to begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela. I am 32 years old. I am originally from Pasadena. I live in Monrovia right now, and I'm an author, a speaker, and a teacher. I travel around to conferences, and I offer workshops, and I usually do some poetry performances or speak to graduations, do all kinds of different kinds of speaking, motivational mostly. And yeah, I'm a poet, and I love to use words to try and change the world.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. And Roberta.
My name is Roberta H. Martinez, and I'm a historian and a writer. And one of the things that I get to do is similar to Angela, kind of motivate people, encourage people to kind of focus on some of the threads that we've lost in history for folks that are working class, Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, Latine, and especially women.
Roberta,
and I also used to have a show.
That's right, you did. I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to work on that. Your affiliation with Pasadena Media goes back quite a ways. And so for those who might not be familiar with it, that show was Casa Martinez.
Yeah. We had nearly 200 episodes, which was really fun.
That is fantastic. And Angela, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to cut you off. I know you wanted to say something.
I'm sorry.
Say that Roberta is the OG.
She's the OG.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, the obvious first question, I think, here is how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected each of you in your daily life?
Well, personally, it's affected me by, okay, let me take a breath. I am someone who struggles with my mental health a lot. And that's something that I use. I use my own experiences with my mental health to talk a lot about different things on my podcast. And this has been a even more difficult time, specifically not being able to leave the house because, I think that what we have a lot of the times is like these easy buttons. When things get hard in our lives, we can just leave. We can, I can usually go hiking. That's a big, place for me to kind of just release. But then there are, there's a lot of different ways we try to keep ourselves busy in order to avoid some of the not so great parts of our life or our home life maybe. And this has affected me in a way where it's taken a lot of the plans that I've had, but it's given me an opportunity to rebuild my home structure kind of with my family members and, really develop a deeper relationship. But it's affected me also income-wise because the day that they said that all of the schools were going to be closed, I had already had about 6 cancellations for my speaking gigs and also for workshops that I was doing. And, 2020 for me was supposed to be this year where I was going to make this big comeback in terms of I hadn't been creating for a while. And so I was ready to come back strong. And I had it. I mean, look, you see this thing right here? That's all of my plans. I had it mapped out. All of those things, I had to come to terms with the fact that those things are not going to happen, but that doesn't mean that my goals go anywhere. It just means that I need to adjust. And so it's been a huge adjustment. Some days suck, but some days I find joy in really small things, and that has been a gift.
Wow. We appreciate your candor in that. Roberta, how about you? How has this affected you directly?
Well, in some ways, as somebody who spends a lot of time doing research, I'm kind of used to being alone and being at the house. So that hasn't been such a big change. But one of the things that I've been doing in the last 2, 3 years has been actually doing playwriting and acting. And so I was in a production at Casa 0101, Chicanas, Cholas y Chisme, and we closed mid-run. We were, canceled due to pandemic. And I was ready to go to another production as soon as that one finished in Orange County. And that was canceled. So all of a sudden, sort of going into this new part of my life and experience, all of a sudden, instead of being up from 6 at night, working from 6 at night and staying up till midnight or 1, all of a sudden, all of that is gone. And so, your life gets upended a bit. I mean, that's for me on a personal level. The other thing is that I'm now working from home, which I have been doing, but so is my husband. And so we're adjusting to being here together, which is really, really different. We've never done that before.
But you're still speaking to him at this point.
We are still speaking to. Well, we figured out how to do it. I'll tell you. One of the things that we did was we began to talk about it kind of early on. And so he walks the dogs. I feed the dogs. We have breakfast. I wash the breakfast dishes. We eat separately. During the rest of the day, he's in his part doing his stuff. I'm doing my stuff wherever I am. And pretty much the time that we see each other is around dinner time. So it sort of stayed the same. And yeah, we still talk.
Well, that's a good thing, and that's definitely some advice for viewers at home.
Yeah.
Angela, your introduction was a bit revealing. You mentioned struggling with mental health, and I hope you won't mind my probing a little bit deeper there. But I was wondering what you have found to be the most troubling as a result of the pandemic and the uh, stay-at-home order. Is it the inability to socialize, or is it more troubling that all of the plans that you have had been placed on hold?
Well, like Roberta, I'm also a person that I kind of, as a writer, I kind of go into myself easily, and so it wasn't the isolation so much that bothered me, but I think you got it correct. It was the loss of the plans I had. It was difficult for me to let go of those because I mean, it was the first time in my adult life that I had planned to have a great year, and I was also in a mental headspace where I was in a good place to go after those goals, and I was ready. I was so ready, and then not, and then having those plans change um, revealed the fact that maybe I wasn't ready because if I was, I kind of needed to focus more on healing myself and figuring out my own feelings and instead of chasing outward external validation of what all of the accolades and all of those things, all of the conferences I was going to get to speak at, and kind of like all those bragging rights. It was hard to let that go. That was hard for me, but it has been an important lesson to learn.
And certainly something that you have found a way to overcome and thrive in spite of.
That's what the podcast has. So my podcast kind of took I pivoted with it, and I let all of the emotions and the feelings that I was having. I decided to pivot the podcast and start doing mental health checks with close friends.
Mm.
And recording them so that people can hear that everyone's not doing great, but there are some really funny moments that happen, but like all of that needs to be included in the conversation, because I think that often we leave things at a really surface level and people then are left feeling alone because no one actually says how they feel. And then that's what I want my podcast to be. I want it to be a place where people know that they can come and I'm going to keep it real with them. And the people that I have on my show are going to keep it real. And it's a place where you can be yourself. And that's the thing, ironically, that's the thing that's gotten me through it, because there is therapy calls that I've been talking to a therapist on the phone, but it's not the same as going in person. And so the podcast
Mhm.
has turned out to be like an added form of therapy for me, because it's a place to put all of my feelings, then be able to turn that pain into power by using it and sharing it with people.
Well, you've obviously found an avenue of therapy, as you just mentioned with the podcast. But let me ask you this: do you feel that the mental health community or those that are affected uh, are underserved during this pandemic? Is there a support system in place? Have you found other avenues of support? And if so, could you share some of those with us? And if not, do you have suggestions about things that could be done to help more people during this time?
Well, see, all of the avenues of healing that I have found for myself, I had to seek out. And so none of them were no one, even if you need therapy, no one knocks on your door and says, "Hey, you need
How you doing today?
therapy." And so you have to want to feel better. And the want to feel better needs to outweigh the embarrassing part of what the stigma around it is. It has to outweigh that. And for me, it finally was starting to, because before this pandemic started, I was going to these classes. I was going to DBT skills classes. And those are classes that people with overwhelming emotions they go to these classes to kind of learn how to self-regulate themselves. And so I was going to these classes, and they were really helping me. And so then for it to be stopped literally in the middle of the 15-week session, and then me having to be like, oh, okay, well, what coping mechanisms do I have left if all of the ones that I was, reaching for are taken away? And that took me back to, basics. And I started writing, just kind of stream of consciousness writing every morning, and letting all of my emotions come out that way. And then noticing that when I would go into the living room, I was a little less irritated, and I was like able to go into, you know, get something to drink without, being annoyed by people or anything like that. And I started to see that, oh, when I put in a little effort, I get a lot back. And so I think you really have to seek it out for yourself. And that's a decision only you can make. But there are resources if you seek them. And especially there's actually a millennial came up with this, and it's a therapy for Latinx. And it's a website where you can actually go on and find yourself a therapist who is Latinx as well. And so there's this aspect of being able to identify with the person you're sharing your deepest, most intimate feelings with, and how that affects one's healing process. And it has made all of the difference for me. And so therapyforlatinx.com is up and running, and you can use it. And there's our mental health resources available on there.
Well, Angela, thank you for taking a moment to share these deeply personal aspects of your life in dealing with this pandemic. Um, Now, if I can
Joe?
move. Hmm?
Well, I was actually going to say, so, and for me, one of the challenges is I am in one of the groups where I don't get to go out. I mean, it's because I'm the age I am. That's actually been one of the challenges that I've been dealing with the pandemic. Because, I mean, those of you that know me from Pasadena, me and Angela, we know each other. I'm used to being one of the senoras that's there handing out the sandwiches, or one of the senoras that's busy getting people together. I can't do that. And so that has been one of those things that I've had to adjust to, because my I had a friend that used to use the phrase that she was a professional volunteer.
Mhm.
And so I embrace that for what I have done for most of my years here in Pasadena, and I can't do that job. So all of a sudden, it's finding myself being limited by external sources,
Mhm.
and trying to adjust to that has been a challenge.
Yeah. It's your nature. That's your nature, is to be of service. And I imagine it didn't even occur to me until right now how that
Yeah,
might, if I were in your age group, how that would affect me, because same, And so
yeah, yeah.
out there and not being able to, that just kind of, that I never even thought of that.
Yeah. No, no, if you think about what's happening politically, if you think about what's happening socially, Those are two of the areas over the decades that I've been involved here in Pasadena, where I've been able to, I'm fortunate. I have good health. I have strong English speaking skills. So I'm able to go to different places and not speak for somebody else, but just kind of raise questions. I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So, do you find yourself uh, feeling obviously frustrated, but in a way helpless as a result of this because you are unable to do those things that you enjoy so much?
Well, it's partially feeling a little bit, not so much helpless as limited. And part of that begins to get to something a little bit different, which is, you know, what if I'm one of those folks who's very fortunate? I could go out there, I could be providing help, but I'm an asymptomatic carrier. I don't know, right? And because I haven't been ill, I have not been tested. So we don't know to kind of rule that out as far as that goes. So being in limbo is an awkward experience and a different experience for me to learn from. I mean, there's a lesson here. I haven't gotten there yet, but there is a lesson here.
You
Yeah.
say you haven't gotten there yet. You're still trying to learn that lesson.
Mhm.
Well, it's a hard one. It's a hard one because you see community members that are struggling. You see community members that are, I know part of what we're talking about a little bit later, or in theory, was just kind of this whole idea about representation. And I read things where there was at one point, what was it? Oh gosh, I don't remember what the civic organization was, but people were going there who were monolingual or dominant Spanish speakers, and a poster had been put up watching for symptoms of COVID. And there was an official effort that actually went and took those posters down so that people did not get information. People who were Spanish speakers did not get that information. And that's the kind of thing where typically I would be able to say, now, wait a minute, and then go to this meeting or something in some sort of a public venue or offer support, or maybe try and help somebody go to see what they might do about that. And I can't do that.
Well, building upon how this is affecting each of you in your own daily lives, I have to ask how it's like as authors or writers uh, when you are required to stay at home. It seems that we have this image of so many writers as being inspired by the places that they travel or simply just being in a particular location. However, as is the case for just about all of us right about now, we're all kind of stuck being at home. Uh, do you find it more difficult to write, uh, or do you find that inspiring?
For
I
me,
find it. Oh,
Both of
go
you,
ahead, Miha. You go ahead.
which
You go ahead. Your turn.
no, go ahead, Roberta. Your turn.
I was just, I was just going to say. So for me, part of what I find challenging is when I'm not home, or rather, when I am home, I have to think about the dirty dishes. This room that I'm in had, like two a dresser of drawers full of pictures. All of a sudden, I felt like I needed to get everything in order. So that was, I'm sure, one of the ways that emotionally I was getting some kind of control over something, and something that needed to be done eventually. And also, I think part of what also was connected was that is because I embrace my years and I like to kid around and say I can see the cardboard on the calendar. I'm very aware that at some point or the other, I'm not going to be here to organize those photos.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure who's going to be able to do that. And so there's a sense, being a historian, there's a sense of legacy and keeping what's been going on in the family and history and the community going on. So I want to kind of get all of that in order, even though I don't feel like I'm going to be ill or anything is going to happen to me. But it seems like it's a smart thing to do.
okay. And how about for you, Angela?
For me, the writing part has uh, the quarantine forced me to write because for whatever reason, I was not letting myself, like there has been a book in me that has been wanting to exist for the longest, but in order for it to exist, I need to uh, feel some things that I don't want to feel. And so I had been avoiding it. But then when I mentioned that, because I was struggling, that I needed some type of coping mechanism, to a healthy one. And so I started doing the stream of consciousness writing. The moment I put my fingers to the computer, that book was like, here I am.
So you would say it's actually been a blessing in disguise in that respect.
Mhm. Because I started writing out of pure necessity. And then when I remembered, it was almost like trying to remind me that I could do that. And it was a good reminder. It felt good. It feels good to write again.
Mm.
All right. Well, that is wonderful to hear. In the opening discussions, there was mention of how this pandemic and the sequestration that has followed has been financially devastating for a lot of people. Certainly, both of you have had setbacks there, but it's been devastating, obviously, across the country. And in recent weeks, we have seen a lot of, at least the news media would have us believe, that there are a lot of protests taking place. People wanting to see the country reopened, that the states allow business, that cities allow stores to open up again, and that there's a return to life as it was before COVID. Certainly, there are medical experts that are advising caution that that we may not have as of yet seen the worst of this, that there could be more to come, that if we reopen too quickly, we could set ourselves back even further. But to that end, I'm wondering if you feel that the millennial community is taking this illness seriously. And Angela, how about if we begin with you on that?
Well, it's for me, it's weird to speak for anybody that's not myself. So I can just say that from what I've seen, um, there are people who are, and there are people who just aren't. I mean, I saw this one girl that I considered to be of sound mind, like, and she's partying, like, and I'm just like, what are you doing? But it's not my place to. I mean, I don't feel comfortable intervening in her choices, but you start to see certain people do certain things that you're like, I would not do that. And I'm a millennial, we're the same age, but we just have different outlooks, I guess, or maybe different perspectives on it. And so I don't really think there's any real like millennial reaction or baby boomer reaction. It's just certain individuals place more weight on certain things than others. Whether, for me, I think I don't have the luxury of being all, whatever, doing whatever I want, because I live with my mom who's 65. And so, like, what would that, I don't know how I would handle that if I were the reason that something happened to her. And so that's something that I have to keep in mind, be out of necessity for my family. But there are some people who maybe live alone, where it's a lot easier to feel as though their choices don't affect anyone else. I just don't have that luxury.
Okay.
Well,
And
and I'm not
and
sure that it's a luxury, Mika. I mean, I think it's a reality. And I think that the luxury are the people, the production I was talking about that stopped. We went to the performance. We were there at our call time, ready to roll, and then the cast members began to bring up points like you're bringing up, Angela, because some of them are living with their grandparents, or some of them are listening, and so they're 22, they're 30, whatever along. Not an issue for them, at least as far as it was rolling out March the 13th. But they knew that, again, they could be a carrier, and it might not affect them very badly, but it potentially could kill somebody that they love. It's a reality.
okay, so now let me go to the other end of the spectrum, and I'll begin with you with this one, Roberta. How about
Sure.
baby boomers? Do they take this situation seriously?
I think it's the same thing that Angela's saying. You have some people that I think of as baby boomers, or whatever is one down from baby boomers, right? And there are some people that are being led by their political beliefs rather than by scientific data.
Yep.
And so I think if people know what's going on, if they understand that, that the data is out there, the information is out there that lets folks know how deadly and how quickly this can replicate itself and how it, because we don't know anything about it, it's like chasing after water, you know? You go to get a cup and you try and pick it up and then it's already scooted down because it's changed. And how far back do you have to go back to get the sponge or the paper towel or whatever you're imagining to try and catch it? And it keeps moving on. So I think that runs the gamut for people that are boomers. I think a lot of people, I think one of the things I've seen for my contemporaries is this kind of recognition about one's mortality,
Mm.
and the fact that relationships with family have been changed. I mean, I have not seen, I will probably go a year without seeing my daughter and her family who live in Portland, Oregon. We talk, she and I, every day for 1 to 5 minutes while she's on her way to work. And I'm not even sure if it's going to be longer than that. Our daughter-in-law and our son, we haven't really seen them to spend time with them, and they just live over in Arcadia. And so you have a lot of people who are between Angela's age and my age that, for a variety of reasons, maybe they're working out in the field somehow or the other. All they can do is see each other through a glass pane. That's the closest that they can get. Or folks that are in nursing homes that are dealing with major medical kinds of issues, and they can't have anybody, any of their family members nearby to just kind of do the extra prodding that you need to do sometimes when somebody is ill someplace. And that's a reality that has been made, maybe a little finer, a little clearer, a little more apparent, that some people were dealing with before, but now there are more of us.
Yeah. I think what you said about the political beliefs driving people, because when we saw pictures of those protests happening in Hermosa Beach, it was a mix of ages. It was grandmas, dads, and their kids, and they're talking about I need haircuts and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's like, from millennials to boomers to anything, like their political point of view is driving their actions. And so on both sides, their age doesn't seem to matter. It really seems to the driving force, like you said, seems to be their political views.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a friend, a dear friend who had to move from Carlsbad, move things back here to Pasadena. And so it was a big decision. He is 11 years my senior. He has really, really poor health. And it was one of those things that he had nobody else to help him. So I had to think about, well, am I going to get in the car and do this and go down there? And once we got to the city of Carlsbad, the majority of the people were not wearing masks. You could tell who the out of towners were because they were the ones wearing the masks. And you begin to think of, my goodness, what chances are they taking? How little do they believe in information that's being shared?
Well, before we move on to the next question, I would like to take this opportunity to remind our viewers at home that we are live this evening if you're watching on Tuesday, May the 12th, and our phone lines are open. You can call in with your questions or comments to area code 951-356-6882. That's 951-356-6882, and we would be happy to have you join our conversation on the air this evening. Also, I believe that we are visible on the Facebook chat and certainly through our Arroyo Live page. So there are multiple avenues if you have a question or comment, and we can certainly bring that up. The other thing that I wanted to ask you both while we are discussing what groups may or may not be taking the illness seriously, how about the Latino community as a whole? Millennials, baby boomers aside, um, does the Latino community, do they consider this to be as severe as some other groups may or may not?
Well, the Latino and Black community are, they're it's higher rates. They, like, Americans are being hit hard on all fronts, but the Black and Brown community in this country is especially hard on all fronts, but primarily because many of us live in households with more people, and so it's harder to self quarantine. And also, just, I mean, poverty is a pandemic, and that pandemic affects Black and Brown people disproportionately, more than it does any other group. And so, I mean, I just had to put that out there straight on the front. But I don't know. What do you think, Roberta?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, well, I think it's hard. I actually was talking with a friend of mine who is maybe 26 now, maybe 25, and Mother's Day was just here, and it was U.S. Mother's Day and Mother's Day Mexicana, right? And so part of the fight in that family, the discussion in that family was, would they get together? Because on the one hand, culturally, it makes total sense that you acknowledge your elders, your mothers, a sacred spot, right, that exists. On the other hand, because of the COVID, there were folks that were saying, no, don't come, don't visit. You're showing more love if you don't come than if you get together and bring her the menudo and the, whatever else you're going to have for the postre afterwards. But I agree totally with what Angela's talking about with sort of what's happening within the Black and Brown communities and lower socioeconomic communities across the board. So if we were living in areas where we were near the Appalachians, it would be the poor white Appalachian folks living in the Appalachians too. They're being hit hard. And then there are things like, we have the workers that are out in the field that are picking the fruits, picking the vegetables, and they were essential workers that were excluded from stimulus. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways that Black and Brown folks and people that are working on a day to day that are doing the essential jobs that we sort of see as invisible jobs. All of a sudden, there's groceries at the supermarket. All of a sudden, there's water, at our restaurant tables. All of a sudden, the things that we ate that we dirtied are clean for the next group of people that are coming into the restaurant. There's a lot of work that's going on that we're not seeing. And um, all of the people that are providing care for young children. So the preschool, a lot of people, when they're talking about getting ready to come back to work, how are the people that are going to be working finding a place for childcare for their children? Because the childcare workers are not going to be, they're among the poorest paid. And how are they going to, what kind of regulations are coming up of all of that? It's complex.
Well, we have a Facebook comment, and a viewer is wondering if there is a recommendation for where people can go to get information regarding COVID, but for those who primarily speak this Spanish language.
I would think among the places you might go would be places like Chirla, CHI, excuse me, I'm getting a dry mouth, CHIRLA, that might be able to help. Here in Pasadena, we have the Day Laborers site, which is affiliated with NDLON, the National Day Laborers Organization. I'm thinking within the city, you should be able to go to the health department. I know that we have a strong health department that has information in English and Spanish on most topics, and also has speakers that I believe are or used to have. I don't know what it is currently, Mandarin and other languages.
Okay. All right.
So I'm thinking, yeah, he did. So I'm thinking that
Right.
they're
Well, we
also,
also have.
okay, we go. No, go ahead. But I'm bump.
Angela, did you have a comment?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. And I'm thinking we may have lost Damien. There was also a Jen that was holding. I wonder if she's available.
Yeah,
Hello?
hi, it's Jen.
Hi, Jen. How are you this evening? Thank you for joining us.
I'm great, and thank you guys for coming on. And I'm really loving what I'm hearing. My question is, because, we're all sort of learning this live together. Do you feel that a lot of people that are going out, like the ones that I'm seeing and the seniors that I know, I'm a millennial with a boomer ma, in part it's a feeling that the government wouldn't open if it wasn't safe. And there's this sort of perception that it's not as deadly now as it was because they wouldn't open up. Because I do see people who have this, I don't want to say innate trust that governance is there to protect them, when I may have a contrary view, but that is leading to why a lot of people are going out more and being less safe than before.
Roberta, you or Angela want to?
I have something to say. Well,
okay.
I think that when it comes to that, I think that it was funny how, not funny, it was just interesting to me how there was no, I watched the LA County news briefings every day, and there was absolutely no talk about reopening anything until that group of people in the beach area decided to protest. And it was interesting to me that that group of people might not be highly influential in who they are. Maybe they're not that special or famous, but they're in a tax bracket that might be different from mine. And I thought that it was interesting how there was the protest on one day, and the very next day the governor was saying, yeah, we're going to begin the reopening on Friday. And I was just like, it's interesting to me how the chain of events happened in that space. So that was what came up for me when you were talking, but I don't know about staying in or going out and how that is scientifically like getting worse or better. But I do know that they just extended the lockdown 3 more months, and a bunch of people were just at the beach. So I don't know if those two things are related, but yeah.
So would you say then that you feel that some of this push toward reopening is not so much politically motivated, but driven by the reports of protesting that we have been seeing in the media recently?
Absolutely. They have to keep their constituents happy, and especially the ones that vote. And that just happens to be the demographic of people that show up to the polls. And so I just think that that's related. I can't prove it, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Okay. Roberta, did you want
I
to?
would feel similarly, and I think part of I think there's a whole bunch of layers to the question that the caller asked. One is, I think part of the reason people are going out is we're not used to it. We're when we talk about luxuries, we were talking about a little bit earlier, we have the luxury of going out and of at certain socioeconomic levels, being able to go out when we want to, having flexibility, not having to be in front of a machine or picking food for 8-12 hours a day and not having anything to do but go home afterwards. And so I think we're a little stir crazy. I know I would love to go to Santa Paula. I haven't been to Santa Paula for a while, and I'm missing being out on the road a little bit. And I think there are also folks that were out there trying to make a point that the government is, as one person I was on Facebook with, people making you wear a mask is being the oppressor.
Oh.
And so the government is being the oppressor by telling you to take care of yourself, essentially, or more importantly, really, to take care of others, to have that strong sense of community, to be aware that the actions that you have an impact on others with whom you're interacting. It's not just you living in isolation. If you live in a family, if you're part of a group, if you're on a train, whatever you do has an impact on others, just as what others do have an impact on you. And this day that I was in Carlsbad and I was watching people going out, which was the same day as the protest, it was a matter, I think, of folks feeling somehow or the other that what they felt was more important than what others might feel. And the jeopardy that they might cause others wasn't real. And part of that is based upon, at least from what I've seen, many people who don't want to believe the data. They don't believe the scientific data that's out there. The sort of things where, what is it? There is the one plant in, I'm forgetting whether it's Nebraska or Iowa, where it is a meat packing plant. And I believe it was something like 58% of the people who were working at the plant tested positively for having COVID. And yet the boss of the business, the company, was going to make the employees continue to working there, which I think on the one hand, there are political kind of outcomes that come from that and social outcomes that come from that that are negative. But even as a business person, if you have 58% of your folks that are sick at some point or the other, you're losing your workforce. So even if you're looking at production as the be all end all, the bottom line for you, where does that leave you in a while?
I think that also what she said was something about how trusting the government, and like thinking, if you're familiar with George Carlin, I grew up like just idolizing him and watching all of his stand up with my dad. And I in college I studied rhetoric, and so I looked at him as one of the great rhetoricians of our time. And he talks about how many Americans are, it's the great American okey doke, the kind of like idea that everything is going to be okay, that our standard of living will never change, that nothing can hurt us. And it doesn't help that you have the president acting like everything is fine, not wanting to wear a mask or just resisting. And it's almost understandable to see how those people are standing out with signs talking about, I need a haircut, because look at the person that they're following. Look at the person that they believe is in charge and that is, wanting to sign the stimulus check with his name when that doesn't even, what? But I mean, I think it's just all of those things that combine together, and especially people who are in the tax bracket that particular group of people are in, they have not experienced oppression. And so to them, this feels like oppression. Someone telling them what to do or telling them to stay inside or giving them any rule of any kind to follow feels like oppression when you've never experienced it. And so, yeah, I think that they are taking the lead from the person they voted for. And I think that this whole idea that everything's going to be okay is not going to work out well for them or us.
Well, Jen, thank you very much for your call this evening. We certainly hope that provides a bit of an answer for your question. I also understand that Damien was back. I wonder if he's still with us. Damien, are you there?
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Hi, Roberta. It's Damien Rodriguez. How are you doing?
Oh, hi. How are you?
Damien, thank you for joining us this evening.
Well.
Good.
I'm doing well. I have a question for everybody in the panel, but leaning a little bit towards Roberta because she and I know each other. What do you think that American culture, the United States as a whole, everybody living in the United States in 2020, can learn from the Latinx community and other minority communities who have historically felt disenfranchised and disappointed with the government and with the quote unquote system as a whole? Because I feel like for minority communities, this pervasive anxiety that everybody in the United States is feeling is nothing new. However, we've had to deal with it for a long time, and we've continued and persevered, bounced back, and bettered ourselves over time historically. So what can the United States in 2020 as a whole learn from people like us?
Wow. Oh my gosh.
That is quite a question.
Angela, jump in if you're ready, because you're often ready faster. I'm a slower thinker talker, but Angela's fast.
That was a big one.
That is a big one, yeah. Oh man, there's so many things. I mean, there's again, breaking apart, I think it's important to remember as we're having this discussion that among the people who are out there at Huntington Beach or following, this kind of very feeling oppressive, is we also have Latinos that are doing that. It is not just Latinos aren't of a group, aren't of a mindset, and aren't of an experience. And so there's some folks that are out there that they are, well, and one of the things we haven't talked about is also the business owners, the small business owners who at this time are really being hurt. And they may identify more as a business owner than as being culturally Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latinx. So there's a kind of complexity that comes from that. I think, if anything, looking at things kind of historically, is that there are going to be a variety of responses that will lead to success. If you're looking at any group, if you're looking Black, Brown, women, LGBTQIA, there are going to be just a variety of ways that people are going to figure out what success means to them. And I think the one thing that's constant across all of those groups that's led to success is learning skills and working with others so that you can develop a sense of resilience. And that understanding that when something does have you pushed down, you you may feel it, you may feel depressed, you may feel oppressed, you may feel a variety of things, but that you can pull yourself together and work with. There are skills, there are people who are out there who would like to help. Just even beginning with Angela's talking about how to find a therapist if that's how you're feeling. I mean, that what we're doing here in having this discussion is one of those ways that we begin to push against being pushed down.
Yeah. I think that some other things that can be learned are, resourcefulness, creativity. And historically oppressed people are some of the most innovative human beings to ever live on this planet, period. And I mean, you just you look at, and also community mindedness. I think
Mhm.
that's definitely more pervasive in minority communities out of necessity, but also just because it's like a value system that kind of gets continually passed on, and that's something that I have always appreciated and loved um, about my community. But yeah, I think resourcefulness and how to pivot, because there's for us in this country, we have always had to figure out how to make something out of nothing, how to make $1 out of 15 cents, try to, all of those types of things. And the for me personally, the pivot has came with looking at my table. Say you have your table, your metaphorical table with all of your stuff, all of your tools in your toolbox. And now you say, all right, the construction assignment has changed. We're no longer building this house. We have to build a whole other different one. But these are the tools I got now. How can I utilize them in the best, most resourceful way possible? And I think that, yeah, I think those are patience, humility. All of those things are things that we have. I think we can add to the conversation. But definitely, creativity, resourcefulness, and resilience is number one.
All right. Well, Damien, thank you so much for your call this evening. We do appreciate you watching the show and taking the time to join us and our conversation. And we hope you'll continue to watch. Uh, I would also like to point out that one of the things that could be learned from the Latin community, or the Latino community, I'm sorry, is that historically Latinos are very family centric, and they certainly believe in community and helping one another, and that's something that we could all benefit from. But to that end, I'm wondering how each of you is trying to help your family and your friends and neighbors during this time of adverse situation.
For me, I think you can. Sorry, I always jump in fast.
No, no, that's all right. I
Go,
didn't
let's
want to
go.
I didn't want anybody to feel like they were being singled out. I was hoping that you would decide which one of you wanted to answer that first.
You
And
got the
so
dance going.
if
We're
I had
cool,
a bell,
Joe.
I would ring
We're
it.
cool, Joe.
Angela, you were first on the buzzer.
It's my ADHD. So what happens is I get these ideas, and if I don't say them right, then I'll lose it and I'll forget what I'm,
I
you know.
understand.
And so I just lost it.
You were going to discuss how you are helping your family and friends and neighbors during the pandemic.
So I think the best way. So I just recently gave a workshop called "Turning Pain into Power," and it was a Zoom workshop where I have been taking. So at the beginning of last summer, I called last summer my summer of self, because it was the summer that I was, going through something heavy. And so I was trying to go into myself to figure out who I am and go through this whole, journey that all of us eventually have to start at some point, and I just started at 32. And so all of the kind of lessons that I was learning and all of the things, I had a place to put them with the podcast, but then I felt that the podcast was missing an interactive part. And so my Zoom workshop helped me take some of the internal struggles and lessons that I've learned and put them somewhere where I can turn it into a writing assignment or an interactive conversation with other people to feel less alone. And I remember when everything first started happening, I was looking at all of the people starting to sell masks and people going out into the community, and even Dr. Cruz. I started feeling this comparison thing that happens to us, when you're like, well, I'm not doing enough. And I think that is a very human emotion to have. But what I had to kind of bring myself back to was, okay, well, what do you have to give? You can only give what you have to give. And the only thing I had to give was my workshop, was my words, my poems, my motivation, my gift of teaching and speaking. And I don't know how to sew masks, and I'm probably not going to learn. But the thing that I have to give is the thing that I'm giving. And I encourage everyone to not look outside about what they should be doing, and just look inside and see if there's a small way that you can contribute, and do that, and let that be enough, because it is.
And enjoy it, right? Yeah.
It has to be something you enjoy, otherwise you won't be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
How about you, Roberta? What do you find yourself doing at this time?
Oh, I spend more time on Facebook arguing with people than I used to. And no, but seriously, just trying to be a more moderate voice, but talking about some of the points that we've made tonight. I mean, or that we've shared tonight, really. Just with kind of the logic of where they are, just because I figure there are a lot of folks that maybe are used to talking with folks or interacting with folks that may have similar ideas or come to similar consequences that are angry. So that's one of the things. The other thing is I've been doing more playwriting. I'm trying to help some friends of mine with their playwriting, which has been kind of interesting because we're doing Zooming, and so that's been an interesting thing. Sharing vegetables from my garden with my neighbors. The rains have me having ridiculous, like gigantor chard and artichokes. And so it's been sharing things. Oh, I know one of the other things that's been kind of different. Three of us who were in that play that was canceled, we started writing for a while daily, cooking in the time of quarantine. And so we were sharing family recipes, or recipes in my case that were based on sort of the veggies that were coming up in my garden, or imperfect foods, or whatever it was, and just sharing with each other. So there is that sense of community, and figuring out, I'd never thought about I'd never thought about using a squash that way. A yellow squash, what's that? So that's been part of what I've done. That's really felt pretty darn good. Could I say one more thing, Joe?
Sure.
That has really nothing to do with us specifically, but just kind of on a broader scale. And that is that I really appreciate that you're doing this. And I wish that there were more inclusion of what is happening within the brown, Latino, however folks might want to feel more comfortable, Hispanic, American, Mexicans, whatever they want to call themselves, in the news. Because when you look at news like CBS, when you're looking at 2, 4, and 7, all of those newscasts that are national, we are not included. You are not hearing information about what's happening in Black and brown communities. You're only hearing about what's happening in Black communities. And there are horrendous things that have been happening, especially to young men in the Black communities. But we are so underrepresented, so that something like this is exceptional and doesn't happen nationally. And there's a group of people who are not being served, a group of people who are not being included in the greater discussion about how we're experiencing this COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, it's interesting that you say that now, only because we are coming close to the end of the program, and I was going to ask if either of you had any final thoughts that you'd really like to make mention of before we close the show this evening. Roberta, I'm going to guess that that's really what you wanted to say, although you might have something else too. But let me throw that question at Angela for the moment. If there's anything else that you wanted to say.
I could I go last? Do you want to go ahead, Roberta?
Sure.
Oh, you have more? Okay.
Well, just check out the history. I mean, check out and see what's happening with the facts. As much as folks can, I hope your viewers will look at the data. We're lucky. We live in a town that is filled with science. Look and see what's happening. Folks at Caltech, folks at JPL are still not working on lab and on the campus. That should be telling folks something in itself.
Yeah.
Angela.
Smartest people in the country, let's just do whatever they're doing. Yeah. But the last thing I would like to say is that, so in my workshop, the assignment that I gave to everyone is to make 2 lists. And I would like for anyone listening now to feel free to do this exercise. One list is a list that list of things this pandemic has taken from you. And the second list is a list of things this pandemic has given you. When you write both of those lists, pay a little bit more attention to the one about the things that it has taken. Allow yourself to rip that list up, go and bury it in the front yard and give it back to the earth, because that's where the pandemic came from, and release it. Let it all go and tape up on your wall the list of the things that it has given you, and just try to focus your best on that.
There you go.
Certainly something that can help anybody who is dealing with the emotional or mental discomfort during this time of isolation. That
Yeah.
sounds absolutely wonderful. Okay, very, very quickly, do either of you have any concerns when you go out into the community?
What was that?
Do either of you find yourself having any concerns right now when you go out into the community? I mean, to go to the store or something like that. And this is really has to be a real quick answer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, my glasses keep getting fogged up with the mask.
Put a little soap on them. It helps.
So,
Try nuts.
Yeah, a little soap.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you kidding? Especially if there are people that are sneaking up on you. Luckily, actually, one of the things I'm very fortunate about is I get to go to the senior hour at Trader Joe's, and it is a luxury. Again, I recognize I'm very fortunate that I can go. But yeah, in and out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay, Angela, Roberta, I'd like to thank you again both very much for being here this evening, and for all of our callers and viewers, we thank you as well. If there are topics that you'd like to see brought to into the discussion at some point, you can email them to us at Arroyo Live at PasadenaMedia.org. That's Arroyo Live at PasadenaMedia.org, and we may include them in future broadcasts. Thank you for watching Arroyo Live. And as always, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay home.